Chancellor Amara Okonkwo stood at the window of her quarters on Aurelius Prime, watching the stars. She was tired, the kind of tired that sleep could not fix. For 30 years, she had worked to bring humanity together. She had ended the Mars Rebellion without firing a single shot. She had brought the Belt colonies back into the fold with nothing but words and patience. She had made humanity speak with one voice for the first time in its long and bloody history. And now she was here, on this neutral station, trying to make peace with creatures who looked at humans the way humans once looked at insects. The Valkyrie Dominion had ruled this part of the galaxy for 12,000 years. They were tall, elegant beings with skin like polished silver and eyes that held the cold light of ancient stars. They moved slowly, spoke slowly, lived for centuries. To them, humans were children. Noisy, messy, short-lived children who bred too fast and spread too quickly. Amara understood their fear. In just 80 years, humanity had grown from a single planet to 200 colonies. They built ships faster than anyone thought possible. They adapted to worlds that should have killed them. They were loud and aggressive and refused to stay in their place. The Valkyrie had called this summit to discuss boundaries. Amara knew what that really meant. They wanted humanity to stop growing, to accept limits. To bow. She would not bow, but she would talk. She always believed in talking. The door behind her opened, and her assistant rushed in. His face was pale. "Chancellor, there's been a change in the schedule. The Valkyrie want to meet now. In the main hall. They say it's urgent." Amara frowned. This was not part of the plan. But she nodded and followed him out. The main hall of Aurelius Prime was a vast circular room with transparent walls that showed the endless void of space. Hundreds of diplomats from dozens of species had gathered. They stood in clusters, whispering to each other. When Amara entered, the whispers stopped. She saw the Valkyrie delegation at the center of the room. High Imperator Zithros stood among them. He was ancient, even by Valkyrie standards, over 3,000 years old. His silver skin had darkened with age, and his eyes held no warmth at all. "Chancellor Okonkwo," he said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "Thank you for coming." "Hi, Imperator." Amara bowed her head slightly. "I was told this meeting was urgent." "It is." Zithros raised one long hand. "We have watched your species carefully these past decades. We have seen how you spread, how you consume, how you threaten the balance of things that have stood for millennia." Amara kept her face calm. "We have threatened no one. We seek only to grow and prosper, as all species do." "No." Zithros shook his head slowly. "Not as all species do. You grow like a cancer. You spread like a plague. And we have decided that this cannot continue." Around the room, Valkyrie soldiers stepped out of the shadows. They had been hiding, waiting. Amara felt her heart freeze. This was not a negotiation. This was a trap. "Hi, Imperator," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Think carefully about what you are doing." Zithros smiled. It was a terrible smile, cold and ancient, and completely without mercy. "We have thought about it for a very long time, Chancellor. Your species needed a lesson, and lessons are best taught through example." He raised his hand again. Amara Okonkwo had time for one final thought. She thought of Earth, blue and green and beautiful. She thought of the billions of humans she had served. She thought of her daughter, young and fierce and full of hope. Then the Valkyrie weapons fired, and the Chancellor of the United Terran Republic fell. The broadcast went out instantly. The Valkyrie had made sure of that. Every screen on every human world showed the same image. Their leader, murdered in cold blood at a peace summit, surrounded by enemies who laughed as she died. Zithros spoke directly into the cameras. "Let this be a lesson to all who forget their place among the stars. Humanity will accept the boundaries we set, or humanity will be erased. This is not a threat. This is simply the way of things. He expected panic. He expected chaos. He expected humans to turn on each other, to fragment, to beg for mercy. For 3 days, he got silence. Every human channel went dark. Every colony stopped transmitting. Every ship went quiet. The Valkyrie watched and waited, confused by this strange response. Their analysts said the humans were probably fighting among themselves, deciding who would surrender first. On the 4th day, a single transmission came from Earth. It broadcast on every frequency, in every language, to every corner of the galaxy. It was simple, just 12 words. We remember. We are coming. And we will not stop. Across human space, something changed. Old enemies looked at each other and saw brothers. Ancient grudges suddenly seemed small and foolish. The Mars colonies, who had hated Earth for generations, sent a message of solidarity. The belt miners, independent and suspicious of everyone, volunteered their ships. The lunar separatists, who had sworn never to work with Earth again, sent their best pilots. On 100 worlds, humans stopped their daily lives and looked up at the stars. They thought of Chancellor Okonkwo, who had given everything to unite them. They thought of her smile, her patience, her unshakable belief that humanity could be better than its worst instincts, and they made a choice, not revenge. Revenge was too small a word. This was something deeper, something older, something that lived in the bones of every human who had ever lived. When you killed one of them, you did not weaken them. You woke them up. Admiral Konstantin Reyes received the news on his flagship, the old battlecruiser, Relentless. He was 60 years old, scarred from a dozen campaigns, tired of fighting. When he saw the footage of Chancellor Okonkwo's death, he did not cry. He did not shout. He simply sat in silence for a long time. Then he called his officers together. The Valkyrie think they understand war, he said quietly. They are wrong. They have fought species who wanted to survive. They have never fought a species that wanted to win. They have never fought humans. He looked at each of them in turn. We are going to teach them what that means. And when we are done, the stars themselves will remember what happens when you touch our people. Far away, on the Valkyrie homeworld, High Imperator Zithrus celebrated his victory. He had crushed 17 species before. Humanity would be the 18th. He did not understand his mistake. He did not know that he had just started something that would burn across the galaxy. Like wildfire. He did not know that humanity was coming. And humanity never forgot. The War Council met in Geneva, in the same building where Chancellor Okonkwo had given her first speech as leader. The room was crowded with faces that had never been in the same room before. Mars generals sat next to Earth admirals. Belt captains stood beside lunar commanders. They had spent decades hating each other. Now they had a common enemy, and hatred had become something else entirely. Admiral Konstantin Reyes stood at the head of the table. He looked at the gathered leaders and felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. 3 days ago, he said, the Valkyrie murdered our chancellor. They thought this would break us. They thought we would fight among ourselves, beg for mercy, accept whatever scraps they offered. He paused. They were wrong. A murmur ran through the room. Heads nodded. Fists clenched. I am not going to lie to you, Reyes continued. The Valkyrie Dominion is old and powerful. They have destroyed 17 species who defied them. They have fleets that outnumber ours 3-1. They have weapons we have never seen. By every measure that matters, they should win this war. He smiled grimly, but they made one mistake. They think we are like the others. They think we will fight to survive. They do not understand that humans do not fight to survive. We fight to win. And we do not stop until we have won. Vice Chancellor Yuki Tanaka stepped forward. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a voice like steel. The death of her friend and mentor had aged her 10 years and 3 days, but her spine was straight and her gaze was clear. The Galactic Concord has asked us to pursue diplomatic solutions, she said. They want us to negotiate, to compromise, to accept limitations on our territory and our growth. She looked around the room. I told them that diplomacy requires two parties willing to talk. We are done talking. The room erupted in cheers. For the first time in human history, every faction stood united. In the weeks that followed, human space transformed. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels and mining ships began producing warships. Factories that had made consumer goods started making weapons. Schools became training centers. Hospitals prepared for casualties. But the most remarkable change was invisible. It happened in the hearts of ordinary people. It happened in the hearts of ordinary people. The old divisions simply stopped mattering. A man from Mars and a woman from Earth could look at each other and see only a fellow human. The petty conflicts of the past seemed foolish now. Childish squabbles in the face of something much larger. On the mining station Sirius, a grizzled belt captain named Viktor Kozlov watched his crew work. They were loading weapons onto ships that had never been designed for war. Old cargo haulers were being fitted with missile launchers. Mining vessels were being armed with plasma cutters powerful enough to slice through warship armor. You think we can win? His first mate asked. Victor laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. The Valkyrie have been killing species for 12,000 years. They have rules. They have traditions. They have proper ways of fighting. He spat on the deck. We have none of that. We have been killing each other for 10,000 years, in every way possible. We know tricks they have never dreamed of. He looked at his crew, a mix of criminals, refugees, and outcasts. They think they are fighting the United Terran Republic. They are wrong. They are fighting every human who ever lived. Every war we ever fought. Every dirty trick we ever learned. And they are not ready for that. Deep in Valkyrie space, Major Sarah Chun moved through shadows. She was one of Earth's best intelligence operatives, a woman who had spent her life in the dark places between stars. Now she had the most important mission of her career, find out everything she could about the enemy. She had infiltrated a Valkyrie data center on a minor world called Velthus. The security was old and arrogant, designed to stop species who followed rules. Sarah did not follow rules. What she found made her blood run cold. The Valkyrie kept records of every species they had destroyed. 17 names. 17 civilizations. Some had been peaceful traders. Some had been fierce warriors. It did not matter. The Valkyrie had crushed them all. She found recordings of the final days of a species called the Thornery. They had been proud warriors, strong and brave. The Valkyrie had broken them in a single generation, hunting them down world by world until none remained. She found images of the Sylvith, a race of philosophers and artists. The Valkyrie had considered them beautiful but useless. They had been exterminated as a mercy to spare them the pain of existence. Sarah transmitted everything to Fleet Command. At the end of her report, she added a single note. They planned the same for us. They called it the 18th correction. They expected it to take less than 50 years. When Admiral Reyes read the report, he shared it with every ship in the fleet. He wanted them to know what they were fighting for. He wanted them to understand that this was not about revenge. This was about survival. The Galactic Concord watched humanity's mobilization with growing alarm. Their observers sent reports that seemed impossible. Human shipyards were producing vessels at 10 times the normal rate. Human volunteers were flooding recruitment centers. Human scientists were developing weapons that should have taken decades to design. How are they doing this? A Concord analyst asked his superior, the senior official, an ancient being from a species that had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years, shook his head slowly. They've always been doing this. They call it war. They have been practicing it on each other since before they had language. We thought they had outgrown it. We were wrong. They had simply been waiting. The first fleet assembled at the edge of human space. 700 warships, more than humanity had ever gathered in one place. They were a mix of everything: sleek new battlecruisers, rebuilt cargo vessels, ancient frigates pulled out of museums and made deadly again. Admiral Reyes stood on the bridge of his flagship, newly renamed Okonkwo's Vengeance. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They were afraid. He could see it in their eyes. But they were also ready. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we have a message from Vice Chancellor Tanaka." Reyes nodded. "Put it through." Tanaka's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but determined. "Admiral, the Council has approved your operation. You have full authority to engage the enemy." She paused. "Bring our people home, Constantine." "All of them. I will do my best, Madam Vice Chancellor." Tanaka smiled sadly. "I know you will. And Admiral, make them remember what they did. Make them remember forever." The connection closed. Reyes turned to his crew. "All ships," he said, his voice carrying across the fleet, "prepare for jump. Our enemy believes they have won. They believe we will come begging for peace. They are about to learn how wrong they are." The fleet jumped. 700 points of light vanished into the void, racing toward Valkyrie space at speeds that should have been impossible. Behind them, on 100 human worlds, billions of people looked up at the sky and prayed. They prayed for their sons and daughters. They prayed for victory. And they prayed that when this was over, the galaxy would never forget what happened when you touched humanity. The storm was coming, and it would not stop until the stars themselves had learned to fear the name of Earth. The Valkyrie Third Armada waited at the border world of Kethvorin. Admiral Velthros, a warrior with 800 years of experience, stood on his command deck and watched the stars. His fleet numbered 300 ships, more than enough to crush any human attack. He had studied the humans. He knew their ships were fast but fragile. He knew their weapons were crude but effective. He knew they fought with emotion instead of logic. All of these were weaknesses. The Valkyrie had learned long ago that emotion was the enemy of victory. "Admiral," his sensor officer called, "we are detecting multiple jump signatures at the edge of the system." Velthros nodded calmly. "How many?" "Approximately 700. For a moment, Velthros felt something he had not felt in centuries: surprise. "That is impossible." Human intelligence suggested their entire fleet was less than 500 vessels. "The readings are confirmed, Admiral. 700 ships. They are moving toward us at high speed." Velthros straightened his shoulders. No matter. Numbers were just numbers. The Valkyrie had superior technology, superior training, superior everything. He would destroy this human fleet and earn the High Imperator's favor. "All ships," he ordered, "form defensive formation. We will let them come to us and break themselves against our shields." The human fleet did not slow down. It did not spread out into a careful formation. It came straight at the Valkyrie line like a spear thrown by an angry god. Admiral Reyes watched the tactical display on Okonkwo's Vengeance. He could see the enemy fleet arranging itself in perfect geometric patterns, preparing to absorb his attack with maximum efficiency. "They are using the Velthrani defensive formation," his tactical officer reported. It is designed to withstand frontal assaults by channeling enemy fire into overlapping shield zones. Reyes smiled grimly. Then we will not assault them. Signal all ships. Execute Operation Thunderfall. The human fleet split. It divided into 14 separate groups, each one racing toward a different target. Not just Kethvorin, but 13 other Velkari military installations across the border region. Admiral Velthros watched in confusion as the humans scattered. What are they doing? This makes no tactical sense. It made perfect sense. The humans were not trying to win one battle. They were trying to win 14 battles at once. They were spreading chaos across the entire Velkari defensive line. And then the first group hit. 200 human ships crashed into Velthros' S formation like a hammer. They did not fight the way civilized species fought, with careful maneuvers and measured exchanges of fire. They fought like wild animals, diving into the heart of the enemy fleet and attacking from every direction at once. Velkari ships began to die. The humans targeted engines first, leaving enemy vessels drifting helplessly. Then they targeted bridges, killing commanders before they could react. Then they targeted everything else, pouring fire into shields until they collapsed and hulls cracked open to the void. "Admiral!" a sensor officer screamed. "They are ramming us. Multiple human ships are ramming our vessels." Velthros could not believe what he was seeing. A human destroyer, its weapons destroyed and its hull on fire, was accelerating directly toward his flagship. The crew had to know they were going to die. They did not care. The destroyer hit a Velkari cruiser at full speed. Both ships vanished in a ball of fire. "They are insane," Velthros whispered. "No," his tactical officer said quietly. "They are angry." The Battle of Kethvorin lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Velkari Third Armada had been completely destroyed. Admiral Velthros died when his flagship's reactor exploded. He never understood what had happened. He had fought 100 battles against a dozen species. He had never lost. He had never faced anything like this. Across the border region, similar stories played out. 14 human strike groups hit 14 targets. 12 of those attacks succeeded completely. 2 failed, their ships destroyed by superior enemy forces. But even in failure, the humans extracted a terrible price. They fought to the last ship, the last crew, the last breath. On the Velkari homeworld, High Imperator Zithros received the reports with growing disbelief. His border defenses had been shattered in a single day. Tens of thousands of Velkari warriors were dead, and the humans were still coming. "This is not possible," he said to his advisors. "Humans are weak, fragile. They live such short lives that they should fear death above all else." His oldest advisor, a being who had served 3 imperators before Zithros, spoke carefully. "Perhaps that is the problem, my lord. They live such short lives that they do not have time to learn fear. They burn bright and fast, like flames. And flames do not care if they are extinguished." Zithros stared at him. "You admire them. I fear them, my lord. There is a difference." The human fleet regrouped and pushed deeper into Velkari space. Admiral Reyes drove his ships hard, giving the enemy no time to recover. He captured supply depots and orbital stations. He freed enslaved workers from Velkari mining operations. He destroyed military bases and shipyards. And then he found the Monument of Silence. It stood on the occupied world of Velkos Prime, in the center of a beautiful garden. A tall pillar of black stone, covered with names in 17 different languages. Each name was a species. Each species had been erased from existence. Reyes walked through the garden alone. He read each name, trying to imagine the civilizations they represented, the dreams they had dreamed, the songs they had sung, the children they had raised, all gone. all forgotten except for these carvings on cold stone. He recorded everything and sent the images to every human ship. "Look at this," he said in his transmission. "Look at what they have done. 17 peoples, 17 cultures, 17 histories, gone. They plan to add our name to this wall. The 18th name. The final correction." He paused. "This is why we fight. Not for revenge. Not for glory. We fight so that our children's children can look up at the stars and know that humanity survived. That we refused to become a name on a wall. That we stood up and said, 'Not us. Never us.'" The message spread through the fleet. It spread to Earth. It spread to every human colony. People wept when they saw the monument. They wept for species they had never known. And then they stopped weeping and got back to work. On a distant station, Major Sarah Chun intercepted Valkyrie military communications. The enemy was mobilizing everything. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. The High Imperator himself was taking command of a grand fleet that would crush the human invasion once and for all. 2,000 ships. The largest armada assembled in 1,000 years. Sarah sent the intelligence to Admiral Reyes with a simple question. "What do we do?" Reyes read the report. 2,000 ships. His fleet had been reduced to 400 after the border battles. By any rational calculation, he should retreat, regroup, wait for reinforcements. He smiled and began dictating orders. Retreat was not an option. Retreat meant giving the enemy time to recover. Retreat meant betraying everyone who had died to get them this far. "Signal Fleet Command," he said. "Tell them to send everything. Every ship that can fly. Every crew that can fight. We are going to end this." Back on Earth, the Second Fleet launched. And the Third Fleet, and the reserves. Old ships that should have been scraps. New ships that had not finished testing. Civilian vessels converted to warships in days. Volunteers who had never held a weapon. All of them racing toward Valkyrie space. The final battle was coming, and humanity would meet it with everything they had. The Valkyrie homeworld of Zithron Prime floated in the darkness like a jewel. It had been the center of their civilization for 12,000 years. Great cities covered its surface. Orbital platforms circled it like rings of silver. And between those platforms waited the greatest fleet ever assembled in the known galaxy. 2,000 warships. Ancient battlecruisers that had conquered 100 worlds. New destroyers built with the most advanced technology the Valkyrie possessed. Carriers loaded with firecraft. Command ships bristling with weapons that could crack planets. High Imperator Zithros stood on the bridge of his personal flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was 3,000 years old, and he had never lost a war. He did not intend to start now. "The humans are coming," his tactical officer reported. "They will arrive within the hour." "How many ships?" "Preliminary scans suggest approximately 400. Zithros laughed. It was a cold, ancient sound. "They are sending 400 ships against 2,000. They must truly be as foolish as we believed." But something nagged at him. The humans had proven surprisingly capable. They had destroyed his border fleets. They had pushed deep into his territory. They fought with a ferocity he had not seen in millennia. Was this really the best they could do? The answer came an hour later. The first human ships emerged from jump space exactly where expected. 400 vessels battered and scarred from their campaign of false Valkyrie space. They formed up in a loose formation, facing the massive enemy fleet. Zithros smiled. "They are brave. I will give them that. Prepare all weapons. We will end this quickly." Then his sensor officer made a sound. It was not quite a scream. It was something worse. A small, choked noise of pure disbelief. "My lord, more contacts." Many more contacts. The space behind the human fleet began to ripple and tear. Jump portals opened by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Ships poured through. Not just warships, but everything. Cargo vessels with weapons welded to their hulls. Mining ships with their cutting lasers repurposed for war. Luxury yachts turned into missile platforms. Ancient museum pieces brought back to life. The second fleet arrived. Then the third. Then the reserves. How many? Zithros demanded. His officer's voice shook. 3,400 ships, my lord. And more are still arriving. Zithros stared at the tactical display. He had spent decades studying humans. He had believed he understood them. Short-lived creatures. Fragile bodies. Emotional minds. Easy to manipulate. Easy to break. He had been wrong. He had been so terribly, terribly wrong. Admiral Reyes looked at his fleet and felt his heart swell with pride. They had come. Every ship that could fly. Every human who could fight. Old enemies stood shoulder to shoulder. Mars and Earth. Belt and Core. Lunar and Terran. All of them united. All of them ready. Open a channel to the enemy flagship, he ordered. The face of High Imperator Zethros appeared on his screen. The ancient alien looked older than before. His silver skin had lost its shine. Admiral Reyes, Zethros said, you have come far. Farther than I expected. But surely you see that this changes nothing. We are still evenly matched. Many will die on both sides. Let us discuss terms. Reyes smiled. It was not a kind smile. You want to discuss terms? Like you discussed terms with the Thornery? The Sylveth? The 17 species whose names decorate your monument? Zithros's expression flickered. That was necessary for the good of the galaxy. No. Reyes leaned forward. That was murder. And now it is time to pay for it. There will be no terms. There will be no mercy. You killed our Chancellor. You planned to exterminate our species. And now we are here to show you what that decision cost. He cut the channel and turned to his crew. All ships, attack. The Battle of Zithran Prime began with the fury of a star exploding. The human fleet crashed into the Valkyrie formation like a wave hitting a cliff. Ships died in the first seconds. Weapons fire turned the space between the fleets into a hell of light and fire. Shields flared and collapsed. Hulls cracked open. Crews died in the thousands. The Valkyrie fought with skill and discipline earned over millennia. Their ships moved in perfect coordination. Their weapons fired with devastating precision. They killed 3 human ships for every one of their own that fell. But the humans did not stop. They could not stop. Every ship that fell was replaced by 2 more. Every crew that died was avenged by their brothers and sisters. They fought with a desperation that went beyond tactics, beyond strategy, beyond reason. 19 hours. That was how long the battle lasted. 19 hours of continuous combat, the largest space battle in recorded history. Admiral Reyes watched his fleet being torn apart. Half his ships were gone. His flagship had taken 17 direct hits. 3 of his bridge crew were dead. But the Valkyrie were dying too. Dying faster than they could believe. Admiral, his tactical officer called, her voice hoarse from shouting orders. The enemy flagship is exposed. Its escort has been destroyed. Reyes looked at the tactical display. The Eternal Dominion hung in space, surrounded by the wreckage of its protectors. Zithros had made a mistake. He had kept his flagship too close to the fighting, confident in his superiority. Signal Major Chun, Reyes ordered. Tell her it is time. Deep in the chaos of battle, a small ship had been waiting. It was a boarding vessel, barely visible among the wreckage and explosions. Inside, Major Sarah Chen and 50 of Earth's best Marines prepared for the most important mission of their lives. "Go," came the order. The boarding ship launched. It dodged through the crossfire, weaving between burning holes and flying debris. Valkyrie point defense guns tried to track it, but the ship was too small, too fast. It hit the Eternal Dominion's hull and cut through like a knife. Sarah Chen was first through the breach. She had trained for this her entire life. Every martial art, every weapon, every dirty trick humans had invented in 10,000 years of killing each other. The Valkyrie guards were tall and strong and ancient. They had never fought humans in close combat before. They learned quickly, and then they died. Sarah and her team carved through the ship like ghosts of death. They killed everyone who resisted. They spared everyone who surrendered. They moved with a speed and brutality that the Valkyrie could not match. When they reached the bridge, only 6 Marines remained. 6 humans against the personal guard of the High Imperator himself. 20 Valkyrie warriors, the best their species had produced in generations. The fight lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, 15 of the guards were dead. Sarah Chen stood before High Imperator Zithros, her armor covered in blood both human and alien. Zithros looked at her. He was ancient and terrible, a being who had ruled an empire for centuries. But his hands were shaking. "What are you?" he whispered. "What manner of creatures are you?" Sarah thought of Chancellor Okonkwo murdered at a peace summit. She thought of the 17 names on the Monument of Silence. She thought of every human who had died to bring her to this moment. "We are the species that remembers," she said. "And we never forget." She raised her weapon and fired. Not to kill, to wound. Zithros screamed as the shot shattered his knee. "Admiral Reyes's orders," Sarah explained calmly. "You are not to die. You are to watch." Outside, the battle was ending. The Valkyrie fleet had been broken. Hundreds of their ships drifted dead in space. The survivors were surrendering, their crews too shocked to continue fighting. On the surface of Zithron Prime, human Marines landed. They secured cities without destroying them. They captured leaders without executing them. They accepted surrenders from enemies who expected death. Vice-Chancellor Tanaka had been clear. They were not the Valkyrie. They would not become what they had fought against. But they would make sure the galaxy remembered. Admiral Reyes received the report of Zithros' capture with quiet satisfaction. His fleet was shattered. More than half his ships were gone. Thousands of humans had died. But they had won. Against all odds, against an enemy that should have crushed them, they had won. His communications officer spoke softly. "Admiral, there is a transmission from the surface. Lieutenant Okonkwo reports that the Terran flag has been raised over the Imperial Palace." Reyes closed his eyes. Lieutenant Maya Okonkwo, the Chancellor's daughter, 23 years old. She had volunteered the day after her mother's death. "It is done, Chancellor," he whispered. "Rest now. Your daughter has finished what you started." Around him, the stars burned with the wreckage of 2 empires. And somewhere in the void, the ghosts of 17 murdered species finally found peace. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Zithron Prime. The galaxy was still adjusting to a universe without the Valkyrie Dominion. On Aurelius Prime, the same station where Chancellor Amaro Okonkwo had been murdered, diplomats from 100 species gathered for the signing of the treaty that would reshape everything. The main hall had been rebuilt. The bloodstains had been cleaned. But everyone remembered what had happened here. Vice-Chancellor Yuki Tanaka, now Chancellor Tanaka, stood at the center of the room. She looked older than she had been, worn down by war and grief and responsibility. But her eyes were clear, and her voice was steady. "The Valkyrie Dominion is dissolved," she announced. All conquered peoples are freed. All enslaved species are liberated. The borders drawn by conquest are erased. Around the room, representatives of a dozen formerly subjugated species wept openly. For generations, they had lived under Valkyrie rule, their cultures suppressed, their populations controlled. Now they were free. Reparations will be paid, Tanaka continued, to every species wronged by the Dominion. Their resources, their stolen wealth, their plundered treasures will be returned. This is not negotiable. This is not a request. This is the price of peace. The Valkyrie delegation sat in silence. They had no choice but to accept. Their fleet was destroyed. Their empire was in ruins. The species that had ruled the stars for 12 millennia had been broken by creatures they had considered insects. After the ceremony, Chancellor Tanaka found a quiet moment to stand by the window where Amara Okonkwo had stood on her last night. The stars looked the same, but everything had changed. "We did it, Amara," she whispered. "I do not know if you would approve of how we did it, but we survived. Your people survived." High Emperor Zithros's trial was broadcast across the galaxy. He sat in a simple chair, his wounded leg bandaged, his silver skin dull and faded. 3,000 years of life had not prepared him for this moment. The tribunal was composed of representatives from every species the Valkyrie had wronged. Humans, the remnants of subjugated peoples. Even members of the Galactic Concord who had turned a blind eye for too long. The charges were read: genocide, murder, enslavement, destruction of civilizations. The list took 3 hours to complete. Zithros did not deny anything. He could not. The evidence was overwhelming. The records his own people had kept, the memorials they had built to their crimes, documented everything in perfect detail. When asked if he wished to speak in his defense, he was silent for a long time. "We believed we were right," he finally said. "We believed the galaxy needed order, stability, control. We believed that some species were not fit to exist among the stars. We believed we were making the universe better." He looked at the human judges. "We were wrong. I understand that now. But I wonder if you understand the path you have set yourselves upon. You have proven that you can destroy an empire. Can you prove that you can build something better?" The tribunal found him guilty on all charges. But the sentence surprised everyone. Zithros would not be executed. He would live. He would be confined to a small station orbiting the homeworld he had ruled. And he would be forced to watch as everything he had built was dismantled, piece by piece, world by world. "Death is too quick for you," the human judge explained. "You will spend your remaining centuries watching your legacy erased. You will see the species you enslaved flourish. You will see the borders you drew disappear. And when you finally die, the galaxy will have forgotten your name." Zithro said nothing. But for the first time in 3,000 years, there was fear in his ancient eyes. On Earth, they built a memorial in Geneva. They called it the Garden of 18 Names. It was a vast space filled with flowers and trees and quiet paths. At its center stood a pillar of white stone, very different from the black monument the Valkyrie had built. 17 names were carved on the pillar, one for each species the Valkyrie had destroyed. Below them, artists had tried to capture something of what had been lost. The graceful forms of the thornery, the delicate features of the sylveth, the strange beauty of peoples humanity had never known. The 18th name was human, Amara Okonkwo. Below her name, they carved simple words. She believed in peace. We honored her with victory. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, millions of people came to the garden. They brought flowers. They brought memories. They brought gratitude. Admiral Constantine Reyes retired to a small house on Luna. He spent his days looking at Earth through his window, watching the planet turn blue and green and beautiful beneath him. He rarely gave interviews. He refused to write his memoirs. He wanted to forget, but the galaxy would not let him. One day, a young reporter came to his door. She had traveled from Mars, she said, just to ask him one question. Rhea sighed and let her in. "What is your question?" The reporter sat down and looked at him with serious eyes. "Admiral, what did humanity's victory prove? What did we learn?" Reyes was quiet for a long time. He thought of all the battles he had fought, all the friends he had lost, all the terrible things he had done and ordered done. "It proved what we have always known about ourselves," he said finally. "Push us, and we push back. Hurt us, and we remember. Kill the best of us, and we become the worst of ourselves, at least toward our enemies." He paused. "We are capable of terrible things, things that should shame us. But we are also capable of coming together when it matters, of setting aside our differences, of fighting for each other." He looked out the window at Earth. "I do not know if we are heroes or monsters. Maybe we are both. But I know this, we survived. And the 17 species the Valkyrie murdered did not. If our survival means anything, it should mean that we never let that happen again." To anyone, the reporter published the interview. It was read across the galaxy. The Galactic Concord was restructured after the war. Humanity was given a permanent seat on the High Council, equal to species that had been spacefaring for millions of years. Other species looked at human representatives with a mixture of awe, respect, and fear. A Concord historian wrote a famous essay about humanity's rise. "We thought them children," she wrote, "playing at civilization while the adults conducted real business. We were wrong. They were wolves who had learned to wear sheep's clothing. Wolves who had spent millennia teaching themselves to appear harmless. When the Valkyrie threatened them, they simply removed the disguise." Her essay was controversial. Some humans objected to being called wolves, but most accepted it. They had learned something about themselves during the war, something they could not unlearn. Decades passed, then centuries. The story of the Valkyrie War became legend, then myth, then warning. On a distant world, a young Valkyrie child sat with her parent, reading a history book. She came to the section about the humans and stopped. "Parent," she asked, "who are the humans?" Her parent was silent for a moment. The memories of the war were still fresh, even generations later. The shame, the defeat, the knowledge that everything their ancestors had built had been torn down by creatures they had thought beneath them. "They are a reminder, little one," the parent finally said. "Some species are not meant to be conquered. Some fires are not meant to be touched. And some storms, once unleashed, do not stop until they have reshaped the stars." The child looked at the picture in her book. A human face, small eyes, soft skin, a creature that should have been fragile and weak. "Are they dangerous?" "Yes," her parents said. "They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they are strong, not because they are clever, but because they never forget. They never give up, and they never, ever stop." In the dark spaces between stars, other ancient powers heard the same stories. They were old civilizations, patient and careful, who had watched the Valkyrie rise and fall. They had considered humanity once, long ago. They had thought about testing these strange, short-lived creatures. Now, they made quiet notes in their records. Notes that would be passed down through generations. Warnings that would endure for millennia. Do not touch the humans. Do not threaten their home. Do not harm their leaders. They are small and fragile and brief. They live their lives in the blink of an eye. And they never, not once in all their history, forgotten a wrong done to them. The stars remembered. and they would remember forever. Far away, on a small blue planet circling an ordinary yellow sun, humans lived their lives. They loved and fought and dreamed. They built cities and flew ships and reached for the stars. They were messy and loud and contradictory. And they were free. That was Chancellor Okonkwo's legacy. Not war, not conquest, not vengeance. Freedom. The freedom to exist. The freedom to grow. The freedom to become whatever they chose to be. She had died believing in peace. And in her death, she had given humanity something more valuable than victory. She had given them a future. And that future stretched out before them, bright and infinite and full of possibility. The stars waited. The universe called. And humanity answered. They always would.